Hey folks, my name is Michael Vitiglio. I'm a solutions engineer with LaunchDarkly, and today I'm here to present to you the LaunchDarkly Client Inspector. Now, this was an application created by me with the intention of helping to showcase the LaunchDarkly platform via a native Android app. And what we're going to be going through in this video will be discussing how to acquire the application and how to use it. Well, not in that order though. So, first and foremost, if you were to, if before we go into how to acquire the application, let's go over how to use it and a lot of common use cases. And then we'll put how to acquire the application either on a virtual device or on your own personal Android device for the very end. I need to remind you now, though, it's very important. This is meant for an Android device or virtual device. You could run a virtual device on any major platform. The Android SDK is available for, the Android Studio platform is available for Windows, Mac, Chrome OS, and Linux. So every desktop that you're running on, chances are you could install and get running a Android virtual device and run this app. So first and foremost, though, I would like to bring up the app itself. And so here we go. This is an emulator that I have that's running the Android 6.0 Marshmallow system image. And I chose this primarily because I used to have a Nexus 4 and I remember getting Marshmallow on it. And Marshmallow is the lowest level of SDK or API level that is supported by the Android, well, the LaunchDarkly Android SDK. So let's go over some usage. Now, I'm going to point out first and foremost that, you know what, let's start with a new application here. So I'm going to go into app info and just stop it. Good. I could have done that a little bit easier, I think, but whatever. So we'll go to the LaunchDarkly app. As you can see, there's already a mobile key put in place, and I'm going to show you how to do that during the installation process. At first, though, you'll probably see, please insert mobile key here, which is fine. All you would have to do, if that were the case, would be to go to your project, which I'm going to show you how to set up in a little bit. But under your projects pane, under account settings, you can see the environment. Just look for the mobile key. Good luck using this one. I'm going to destroy this environment after the video. But in any case, paste, which I have already done. But remember, Android is, this emulator is going to assume you are, makes no assumption about, you know, are you on a keyboard or not? You can't just right click is what I'm trying to say. You need to long tap to get these things to come up, such as long tapping here to get paste. Thankfully, though, the paste bin, the little, the part of your operating system that stores whatever you copy and paste, does transfer between the emulator and your native device. So that's great. So I'm going to just, before I hit connect, I want to point out one of the neat things about the connect button. The connect button allows for, in conjunction with the offline connection status and online, will tell you how fast it is to connect to LaunchDarkly. A lot of times you say, oh, this is a fast initialization process. A lot of people take for granted that, like, oh, initialization really shouldn't take too long. But our initialization goes across the network to our service and then fetches down, while providing user attributes, the available feature flags for the system. All of that happens in a very quick process, which I'm going to show in a second. But before we do that, I want to point out that you can just as easily come in to the user tab and modify any of the user attributes, whether built in or we leave room for 3 custom attributes before actually connecting. Now, of course, you can't apply these values before connection. They can only be set at connection. But once connected, the apply button will be enabled and you can change them on the fly. Finally, your flags page will show all of the available flags and their values, as well as a timestamp as of the last time it was updated. And it does update in real time, as we'll see in a second. So let's go back to what I was saying earlier. I'm going to connect. And as you can see, this was not a trick. I did not, like, it isn't because I had connected before or whatever. This application, our initialization process is that quick. And furthermore, because you can tie it to callbacks and do this in a separate thread, it really will not impact the initialization of your application either. With very little overhead, something that you'll hear during a demonstration is we do not poll. We have a long-lived HTTPS connection from our backend to the SDK instance itself that sends discrete updates when they're made from the service side, as you're going to see. And that can be configured as well. So you could still choose to, you know, turn it on or off at runtime or before initialization as well. And maybe in a future version, we can expose that through the client page. Regardless, here we are. Now, let's take a step back now that we've shown how the app works and showcase what you're going to want out of your project. So, pardon me for not tidying up first. First, you're going to want a project. Now, to create a project, you can select this drop down from the UI. And under All, you can select New, which will basically just take you to this page here. Under Account Settings, Projects, you will see all of your available projects. Now, what you could do is select a new project, at which point all you really have to do is provide a name. You can select anything else you want if you were so inclined, but that's not important. What is important, however, for the sake of demonstration that I recommend everyone do is once created and you go back to your feature flags page, or excuse me, before you go back to your feature flags page, go to Edit, and here normally by default require comments and confirmation for flag and segment changes should be unchecked just for the sake of brevity. Perhaps maybe you think like it would be better if you think somehow that during your demonstration you want to show how it's required. That works just as fine. I would prefer for brevity during runtime and then explain that this can all be locked down than to have to be stuck every time changing a flag, as you'll see in a second, having to deal with all that other minutia. So in any case, once you've created that and disabled, created your environment, your project, and then edited the environment to have the appropriate, select the mobile key, you're connected, up and running. Awesome. Now, when we come back to this page, we can simply add a flag. Adding a flag is simple, but I recommend creating 4 flags, primarily because something that's hidden to a lot of our prospects and people who don't know LaunchDarkly is that they'll think, oh, it's a Boolean. Well, I mean, that's step 1, sure. The initial introduction to feature flagging usually comes up like that. But I recommend, but what usually gets lost in the mix is that we actually serve 4 variations, with the last one being the most powerful. We can also serve string variations and numeric variations, meaning integer or decimal. And finally, the JSON flag variation, which is stupendously powerful because once you have a JSON flag, for those of you who don't know, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which basically means that through this notation, we're able to define a class or a type of information. Anyone who knows how to program will tell you that once you have that in tow, you can effectively store any kind of information you like, including paired information. In this case, if we look at the JSON flag variations, you could see that we stored a feature and URL. But I've also in the past used this for XYZ values for positioning or ARGB values for showing a background color. But that's for another time. Regardless, the main thing that's important is we have 1 flag for each variation type just to show that that's what we can do, and it helps start a conversation. Also, I like to use one of these flags. Doesn't really matter which, but I like string because it's easy to look at and read. Number could work just as well. Bool, not so much because you only really have 2 variations. You can create multiple variations and then have the string be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I like to target against the built-in country attribute. Now, it could be anything. For the sake of this demonstration, I chose to use the country attribute. In any case, just to show how that can be done, I'll take a step back here. Simply click on plus flag, give it a clever name. Jenny Vitiglio, probably not a good one. And then here, you can notice like you can't really add a variation to Boolean. And if you don't know why, you maybe shouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. But at that point, all you have to do is click on add variation, and then type in some names like 1, 2, etc. At which point I do like to make off variation 4 and to make it very distinct. And then that'll be that because I'll make 3 and 4, etc. But in this case, I really don't want to do any of this. This was really just a proof of concept. So I'm going to close out. We have our 4 flags. From there, I can now pull out the app. So here, let me just try to see if I can pull this window in a little bit. What's up, buddy? There we go. And now, no, I need to pull a little bit more. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my flags page, and I'm going to start toggling. So first, I'll start with the Boolean. Or the one at the bottom actually is most handy, and since I made string at the bottom, I can simply start turning off. So 1, 2, 3. And as you were able to see looking back and forth, we have an update to the flag saying when we were last updated, and the variation is now 4. Let's turn it back on. 1, 2, 3. Sure enough, it changes. And that goes for all of these. There's no real reason to have to go bananas flipping stuff on and off. Once the proof is, once this is proven and shown, it's pretty much done. But at this point, we can segue and dive in a step deeper. And, oh, well, look at these attributes. How neat is that? Well, we didn't set them at startup. Perhaps maybe for your demonstration, you can set it at startup. In this case, you can use your keyboard, by the way, to just manually plug in a user attribute and show how these values can be changed at runtime. So sure enough, I come back and there we go. Variation 2 came up because I changed it to US. You know what? Let's change it again to CA. And now it's serving 3. So let's take a minute to wrap up all the different features that we went over. We were able to showcase with this app the speed of initialization with a mobile device, and that even includes your own native device. We'll go over how to get that in a little bit. We are able to show the speed of how changing features, never mind pulling down after initialization, but also when changing features on the site side, how easily those changes can change. And we can even come in here and say, you know what, we can even change the variation with the same level of responsiveness. So let's change this to 2 for CA. As soon as we hit save changes, there it is. Good. Happened so fast, I thought I missed it. Let's put it back here. Sure enough, there it is. So we've managed to prove that. And then we were also able to show that from the application's perspective, even when already connected, you can change any of these variations to match whatever you see fit. Stupendous. All through this application. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty with regards to the how to actually get the application. So as I had mentioned earlier, the main thing you're going to want to do is pull down the app by going to mohawkvalleyinteractive.com, github.com/mohawkvalleyinteractive/LaunchDarkly Client Inspector. I'll leave the URL in the doobly-doo. And for those of you who already know how to use Git, you're probably light years ahead of me in ignoring this, but chances are you haven't. So what you have to do is click on clone or download and download zip. That's simple. Pull that down, extract it into its own directory, and then open it using Android Studio. Now you're like, well, hold on. Now I need Android Studio. Yes. So to acquire Android Studio, I recommend just doing a quick Google search for install Android Studio, but I'll try to include this little URL as well. Android Studio is available for all of these platforms, and this installation page is probably one of the best installation pages I've ever seen in my life because it has it speaks to the simplicity that and effort that was put into installing Android Studio for the general public, and in terms of the ease of the install, as well as videos showing how to do this very easy install. Frankly, if you're running on a Mac, you are having the easiest day of all, but anyone using any of these platforms will not have any pain doing the installation. Now, once installed, we still have 2 additional pieces to get involved with, maybe 3, if you want to have this on your own personal device. But let's pretend like you just installed Android Studio and bring up the splash or the initial page for Android Studio here. Shame on me for not getting it started sooner. But, I like just keeping things moving along, stream of conscious and all that good stuff. So here we go, chugging along. You see in the bottom left-hand corner. Ta-da! All right, so now you can see I already have a couple of projects already up and running and whatnot. Normally what you would want to do is hit open existing Android Studio project, but I recommend before starting that to do 2 things. Firstly, we want to install the appropriate Android SDK. Otherwise, the project just won't build anyway. And finally, we do want to create an Android virtual device. We could technically create that second, but without a device to run it on, it would be kind of a moot point. So we can click on Configure over here and select the Avd Manager and SDK Managers. First, let's select SDK Manager. Inside Android, when you select that, you're going to go to Settings for New Projects, select Android SDK, and simply make sure that Android 6.0 Marshmallow is selected. I already have it selected, but note that as soon as a change is made, such as selecting something new or unselecting something that was already selected, the apply button will be enabled, at which point you would hit apply and it will go through the process of getting this taken care of for you. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit cancel. And mind you, that may take a little bit of time. So that's a great time for a bio break or a water or a nap. Well, maybe not a nap. Rest your eyes. Whatever. So finally, now we are going to have the SDK installed. The next thing we're going to want is a device. You can set up your own device, but let's first go with the Avd Manager, which is short for Android Virtual Device Manager. Now, as you can see on this window popping up here with the button Create New Virtual Device, I already have 3 up and running, but what you would want to do is create virtual device. Once that's set up, I recommend going with the phone category and selecting something with a large screen, high resolution. So maybe a Pixel 3XL, maybe a 3A. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Whichever one you feel comfortable with. Pixel 3 is nice. Once you have that profile in tow, though, you will still have to pick. Basically, all that defines is what kind of phone is this going to pretend to be like. So in this case, it's going to pretend to be a Pixel 3, which is my device. Now I'm going to hit next, at which point you're going to need to install the appropriate system image. Now, some system images may not be available for some of the newer devices versus old. And so in this case, I'm like, you know what? I want to make sure that we have Marshmallow available. I think I could still technically get it. Yes, I could still get it, but it's not recommended. And to err on the side of caution, I recommend going that route. So let's instead switch it over to a Nexus 4, which I know had support for Marshmallow. And there we go. Voila. And you're ready to go. Once you've gone that far, go to recommended, Marshmallow, next. You can then change the name if you like. I usually think it's sufficient enough, unless you've got like a whole family of emulators going, then sure, by all means, name it something unique. Hit finish, give it a couple seconds, and you will now have a virtual device. Now, you will still have to start the device, and it still may take some time on the initial startup for the device to come up, but once you've brought the device up, every time you X out, it will simply go to sleep, and it will come back alive just as quick. In fact, I could probably show that right now in real time, if I only didn't have that already running. Here, I'm going to close this out, and you're going to see it saving state, and off it goes. And now from the same window, which you'll see for yourself, you can select this play button here to start the AVD. Now, granted, whoa, look at that, beautiful. Now you could resize it just by using the corner button. It isn't terribly obvious at first glance, just because of the fact that it's kind of borderless window, but just kind of hover by the side there, and then there you go, total control. So yeah, now we've got those 2 prerequisites out of the way. Let's open up this project. Now I do want to point out, you'll want to open it, and here's something neat that comes along for the ride. So I'm going to just drill down. You're going to get a little insights into my hierarchy. I like having a projects folder, and then under the projects folder showing the parent organization that hosts it. In this case, Mohawk Valley Interactive, LaunchDarkly Client Inspector. And you'll notice, unlike any of these other folders, this one has a little Android guy on it. And that's because Android Studios detected that this is an Android product, an Android Studio project that is going to be opened. So I can select OK here. I'm not, because I don't have to. I'm just going to click here. And sure enough, we're going to see Android Studio open up. Ta-da! Now, this window is already open with mobile key. That's not what it's going to look like originally. What you are going to see, and I recommend just clicking on the drop down here on the left-hand side, or clicking on project. If you don't see it, if it looks like this, it shouldn't, but if it does, project should be here on the left bar, kind of in a vertical kind of orientation. Select under assets, mobile key text. Here, I'm just going to revert this back just so you can see what it looked like. What happened? Oh, okay, yeah, there you go. Revert. And this is what it normally would look like. Enter mobile key here. Now, if we change this, it will become the default and what will be shown every time you start the app. And I recommend that because it really does kind of get tedious pasting back in. We are looking eventually to address this by having a little checkbox that says set as default. It'll automatically update it as you go. But regardless, this is the way around that for now. And now we're pretty much off to the races, believe it or not, because as you can see here through the drop down, if you don't see it, you should see the device. Now, if the device hasn't been started yet, it will look like this. It will show like here you have these 2 virtual devices, but they're off. They're effectively, you'll just see the little computer icon there. They're pause. But this one's up and running already, so it should be available. Once that's the case, you have app. Next is 4. I'm going to hit, you know what, let's just, I just want to make sure that we drive the point home here. If I come in here and I just remove it. Yeah, sure. Let's remove it completely. I'm going to hit play. Now, under be mindful of these little buttons down here, these little tab selectors. They're kind of hidden in the interface. Gradle build running. Now, Gradle is the system responsible for building the Android project and deploying it. And by selecting the build, where'd you go? There you go. Yeah, by selecting the build tab, you're going to see it running like that. And now it's deploying. So if we just sit here and wait, you can see, ta-da, up and running. And that's great. And now we're done. Like, we can close Android Studio, and then all we have to do is get to the virtual device manager through that first splash to start this emulator up, and we're off to the races. It'll always be there, no matter what. It will always be an app just waiting for you in your drop. In fact, what I recommend doing, though, is to take that app, click, drag, and bring it over here, and then you're good. So what's the last piece? Right. The next piece you may be asking yourself is, well, that's fine, but what if I want to put it on my phone? Well, I'm going to take my Pixel device here. I'm just going to plug it in. You'll hear USB detected, and I click on my drop down. You're going to see that Pixel 3 is now an option. So if I hit play now, it will deploy to my Pixel 3. Now, it's really kind of redundant to point out, but I do want to show how your Android device should be able to connect to, as long as it's running Marshmallow or newer, should be able to connect to the Android Studio, but USB debugging needs to be enabled. I recommend Google searching for your particular device, but chances are if it's a Nexus or Pixel brand device, it's as simple as going to settings. Now, different phones, different platforms have different methods of getting there. Here on this older version, you would have to go manually to the settings app, scrolling to the bottom, which as far as I've seen, and I have been running Android since Cupcake, you can go down to the very bottom, and sure enough, you'll see about emulated device, or excuse me, about device. Scroll to the bottom, and then just start clicking on build number. See, I'm already a developer, but you need to keep pressing it if not, at which point that will be you will see you are a developer, and when you go back, you'll see developer options. Once you have developer options available, you will scroll down, and sure enough, enable USB debugging, and then you'll be free and clear to deploy. You should have it detected by Android Studio. There's plenty of documentation out there that's a little bit more better defined than what I just provided, and might be able to provide you with some better information. I want to quickly show what a Pixel 3a looks like, just so that you see it, and then we'll be done. There we go. So this device is a little too big. There you go. All right. So maybe one of the drawbacks of making a newer app is that a newer phone is that the resolution is a little tighter. So maybe it will make it look a little sparse also. But otherwise, it should work effectively the same way. I mean, kind of neat things that, like the apply button is visible in a single shot. You don't have to scroll as much. So that's nice. But here's how I want to show how in your device it might be. For example, on the later versions of Android, if you scroll all the way down, this is where you can get access to your settings. Whereas getting your hands on settings here, well, I guess it's still an app. So there you go. A lot of ways to get to the same place. But scroll to the bottom, and sure enough, there it is, about emulated device. So select that. Scroll to the bottom. See, it already says you are a developer. So that was a waste of time for me. But at this point, I can now come in and you can even do a search here. USB? No? Oh, the good. There we go. There we go. Under System Developer Options. What a nice quality of life improvement. And sure enough, USB debugging already set in place. So there we go. We've touched on everything here. And I recommend then keeping this somewhere on the desktop for convenience. And that's it. Let's just do a quick recap on what we've discussed through this entire project video. We discussed the reason for the LaunchDarkly Client Inspector. We went over all of its major use cases as well as one of the known issues we have with it and some of the plans we have for it moving forward, how to get the application and how to deploy it to a virtual device or to your own personal device. Now, I want to stress that this project was not created by or supported officially by LaunchDarkly. However, by all means, feel free to contribute or reach out with any questions, concerns, or comments for me to address. I'll be more than happy to help. And That's pretty much it. So thanks a lot for sticking around this long. It's been a wonderful half hour with you. Have a great day.